let's see what we got this week. So, first up, I got a couple late deliveries. I managed to snag my copy of Legends of the Dark Knight number 5 that I had forgotten to pick up. Looking forward to giving this a read. And also, as promised, I was able to make it out and pick up that missing issue of Catwoman from last week, issue 36. I'll be reviewing this for you guys this week, along with the regular reviews. And then for this week's books, there were 6 new titles. First up, we got Batman Foundation Fortnite. This is the one-shot that ties into the 5 or 6 issue miniseries that came out. Haven't read those yet, but I was able to get them kind of cheap after the fact, so I went ahead and grabbed this one today. Next up, we've got Batman The Long Halloween Special by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. This is one I'm pretty excited to dig into, I think. I mean, I really enjoyed this writing team, obviously, back in the day. Long Halloween and Dark Victory, you know, among my favorite Batman books that have ever been done. When I'm recommending people check out Batman, a lot of times I'll say Year One, Long Halloween, Dark Victory. I don't think I'm alone in thinking that. I'm kind of curious to see how this really fits into the Long Halloween. I really don't know anything about it, but I will give this a read at some point, and we'll most likely talk about it in the not too distant future. As for books in continuity, we've got 4 new ones. We have Batman Detective Comics 1044, this week including a backup story, Arkham Rising by Stephanie Phillips. We have Harley Quinn issue 8, another Fear State tie-in. And then a little bit more off the beaten Fear State path, we have Robin number 7, continuing the Lazarus tournament storyline. And then last but certainly not least, a new number 1, Task Force Z, which I really enjoyed the Road to Task Force Z. And this has got art by Eddie Barrows, who recently just finished up a run on Urban Legends with Batman Cheer. So yeah, excited to give this and the other main continuity books a read and let you guys know what's going on this week in Batman. Alright, so kicking things off with Fear State books first this week. I read last week's Catwoman 36. I gotta say, if I had read this last week, this easily would have been my book of the week. I really enjoyed this read a lot. In the past, I've talked about Catwoman, and I've really liked the idea of like Catwoman, the Riddler, Poison Ivy, and the Penguin, and how they're all kind of interplaying off of each other, and how I wanted to see that team up. And I felt like everything had been somewhat interrupted by Fear State, but finally a lot of those plot threads finally pay off in this, all under the backdrop of the Magistrate trying to take over Alleytown. You have Catwoman trying to find a way to get Poison Ivy away from the White Witch, who is the villain introduced in, I think, the very first issue of Ram V's run. Turns out she's actually working with the Magistrate and basically takes every resource Catwoman and the Riddler can call in to help rescue Poison Ivy and undermine the plan that the Magistrate has for her. Last week I said that it felt like Poison Ivy's whole subplot in Fear State is somewhat unnecessary and just an added complication. I still think that that's the case, but what I'll say in its defense is that at least when it comes to the main Catwoman title, where a lot of this stuff has been playing out, this feels like a complete book. Like, if you're reading Fear State, or if you're not reading Fear State, this is a really solid book on its own. Continues to be a favorite of mine week to week, and I wasn't sure how it was going to hold up over this Fear State event. I was actually pretty disappointed it was being included, but it's good stuff. It's really good. The many plot threads that Ram V's been building up are continuing to pay off, even in the backdrop of this big Fear State event. So really enjoying it, really recommend it. So So you probably noticed on the cover of Catwoman 36, we had Harley Quinn joining in the fun to rescue Poison Ivy. Makes sense given their relationship. And on Harley Quinn number 8, we get Catwoman on the cover. Now, this is a book that, has been a mixed bag for me. I don't care for the artwork. Occasionally it gets a chuckle out of me, which I appreciate, but a lot of times it kind of falls flat. What I will say in defense of this book is with Fear State Part 2, a large portion of it is told from the point of view of Kevin, which is a character I actually really enjoy in this book, and it was fun kind of seeing him off on his own, having his own adventure, and having the story told from his point of view. I really, really liked that. About midway through the book, we switch gears and pick up Harley Quinn, Catwoman, and Poison Ivy, basically appearing to be immediately following the events of Catwoman 36. And that's where this book, to be honest, really fell apart for me this week. We get a whole backstory, like Harley Quinn goes through from childhood up till how she got to know Poison Ivy, and it just all feels very heavy-handed, trying to be funny and not really succeeding. I find Stephanie Phillips is a lot more funny with Kevin and the supporting characters. We get the return of the Caucus of Corruption. Again, a group of characters that she's introduced that I've found to be quite funny, but when it comes to Harley Quinn herself, everything she says just lands flat to me. I just got done praising Catwoman and how well it's tying into Fear State while still maintaining its own identity. This book, on the other hand, really fails at that, and I think, it's not really set up for success because Harley Quinn is tying into Batman, she's tying into Catwoman, it seems like she is everywhere. And in the main Harley Quinn book, she wasn't even in Gotham at first, she was off having that whole camping trip last month, so this book feels like it's trying to fit in too many different places and plug a bunch of different holes that other books are creating. This month, you really felt the effects of it, where this didn't really feel like it had much of an identity at all, aside from, again, the Kevin stuff, which tied in with Hugo Strange, and kind of had its own thing going on. So Harley Quinn overall 50-50, if not just kind of a plus. Alright, and then thankfully on time this week, the last Fear State tie-in book of the month is Batman Detective Comics 1044. I really enjoyed issue 1043. I like that we're digging into Batman and Mayor Nakano having to work together to get through this early onslaught of what's going on with Fear State. Similar to Catwoman, it's trying to both balance what's going on with Fear State with what's been going on in Detective Comics, specifically with Vile. In this, Mayor Nakano is attacked by a whole bunch of vile spore that are growing in the sewer. And you have Batman on the other side of the wall, basically trying to find a creative way to save the mayor from being corrupted by Vile. Overall, I think that this story, is continuing to hold my interest. I do like Batman and Nakano and how this is all tying in together. If I had a criticism of Tamaki in this Fear State tie-in, is that it's just not doing quite as good of a job balancing its own story with the Fear State story in the way that Catwoman is just doing so adeptly. But that's not necessarily the fault of Tamaki as much as it's just Ram V being able to kind of go above and beyond what typically you see in these crossover events. What Detective Comics does have going for it is, I think, the only Fear State tie-in that is maintaining a regular artist with Dan Mora continuing on artwork, which is great. And when I read 1043, I did feel like his art was feeling a little bit rushed compared with prior weeks. But that said, going into this week's issue, I thought that it recovered nicely and whatever kind of weird vibes I was getting largely disappeared. So all told, Detective Comics 1044, probably my second favorite Fear State tie-in that they've been doing. Edged out just a little bit by Catwoman, but both titles are definitely worth your time, definitely worth picking up. Of course, since it's Detective Comics, we do get a backup story, and in this case, it is on the cover called Arkham Rising, although inside the book, it's actually called Foundations. Now, as this is part one of a backstory, there's not a whole lot to glean from it because we're only basically getting half of the first issue. What I will say is this might be a backup story worth skipping for now. Even if you're reading Detective Comics, it might be worth waiting until this is finished to go back and read the whole thing together. Early in the story, you get a flashback to the construction of Arkham Asylum, and you see during its construction, basically a guy goes crazy and hacks everybody up with an axe. Which is well realized in the artwork by David Lapham in this. However, immediately following that flashback, we get into present day, where it appears to be post Fear State. And I'm not going to show anything from that at this point, or really discuss much further, because it ties into things that's going on with Harley Quinn in issue 8, and stuff that happened with Kevin specifically. It ties in with what's going on in Detective Comics proper, and it kind of seems to give away where things are going to end up at the end of Fear State. Now, if you read it and you think I'm putting it in the wrong time period, and it actually takes place before Fear State, feel free to let me know down in the comments and let me know why. As much as I enjoy thinking about continuity, like, I'm never very good at placing things where they belong, and a lot of times I need someone else to explain it to me. So I certainly could be wrong, but I don't think so in this case. So, all told, Detective Comics, well worth a read. Just skip that backup story if you are ready. Now, picking up the non-Fear State books this week is Robin number 7. With Robin number 6, we had some pretty interesting developments in the whole Lazarus tournament. We found out that Mother Soul isn't actually Mother Soul. She's someone else, but we don't know who. We found out that this whole tournament is really under false pretenses, and there's another layer to what's actually going on. And with issue number 7, we get some interesting answers, as well as some more questions. So first up, Mother Soul's true identity, spoilers, is revealed to be Rue Al Ghul, aka Ra's al Ghul's mother, which kind of a crazy development. It kind of makes me want to go back and look at issue 5 again, where Robin has his one-off with Ra's al Ghul, and see how that kind of ties in, if there's any hints to that in that issue. Then we also find out that the island itself had a Lazarus pit that leaked into the very foundation of the island, as Robin explains to Mother Soul there. And the whole purpose of this tournament is that the island itself craves death and needs sacrifice in order to develop whatever's being developed inside the island, and we don't know what that is. So all in all, some really fun developments. I found that Robin continues to surprise me every single week. I always really like it. The idea of Robin going off into this sort of Mortal Kombat style tournament, I thought was a really fun concept of an idea. And as it continued forward, it always stays fresh. There's always a new element going on, something to grab your interest and take you in a new direction. If every single issue was just a throwdown between Robin and another character, this book probably would have gotten stale pretty quickly. But instead, there's a lot more mystery and intrigue in this book that makes it a lot of fun. So as we head towards the conclusion of the book, Robin, despite trying to get to the bottom of what Mother Soul has going on, drags him back into the tournament where he has to fight Flatline one final time. And it boils down to one of them has to die. And at the end, not too surprising probably, but spoilers nonetheless, Robin does end up accidentally killing Flatline. He doesn't seem to be intending to, but in the course of the fight, he bests her and ultimately kills her. Pretty interesting development for Robin, seeing as, Damian is someone who really hasn't shied away from the idea of killing, but now in that moment, because of his relationship that he's kind of quasi-developed with Flatline over the course of the series, it doesn't sit the same way that I think it would have when he was eager to get off to this island, when Robin was just a backup story in Batman and Detective Comics, and Robin couldn't wait to get to this island to participate in this tournament. So, interesting development for Damian Wayne as a character here. Damian Wayne is someone who can come off a little bit one note if the writer doesn't really know what to do with him. So my compliments to Joshua Williamson He's found a really interesting direction to go with the character, and I'm getting pretty excited to see his take on Batman when he takes over that title after Fear State. So that just leaves us with Task Force Z #1. Probably the book I was the most excited to read this week. Just because I've really liked what we've seen from Matt Rosenberg so far. I really enjoyed Eddie Barrow's work on Batman Cheer in Urban Legends. And on top of all that, the Road to Task Force Z backup story featured in Detective Comics was a lot of fun to read. Now, I said at the time that part of what I liked the most about that story was actually Deb Donovan and how she interacted with Red Hood and being mixed up with all these costume vigilantes. And I admitted that even though that was my favorite part of the book, I wasn't expecting her to actually port over to Task Force Z. And sure enough, at least as far as issue 1 goes, she's not in it. So I gotta say, despite that, there's still plenty to enjoy in this book. I'm not the biggest zombie fan in the world, but I thought that the way they set it up in this book was satisfactory enough, and ultimately this feels a lot more like a Suicide Squad kind of a book than it does like a zombie book, at least to me. As you can see, artwork in it is top-notch, like really great artwork. It feels like it's picking up right where Batman Cheer left off. Given that this is so Red Hood forward anyway. So as far as the story goes, we find Red Hood being the leader of this Task Force Z, which is a team of zombies including Man-Bat, Bane, Arkham Knight, all of whom have been rendered undead with Lazarus resin, which is, I presume, a new invention for this story. Their first mission is to take down a group of small-time crooks, which ends up being Mr. Freeze, and he happens to be smuggling even more Lazarus resin around the city. It's unclear really what is going on, but clearly Task Force Z has been lied to, and Red Hood is left with the fallout of it. Again, this book feels very much in line with like a Suicide Squad type of a story, but I wasn't mad at that. Like, I thought that it was fun, and I don't want to spoil what happens. I'll just say that what happens, at least for me, was pretty surprising. So I do definitely recommend giving Task Force Z a try if you're thinking about it. Definitely a fun addition to the Batman library. So all told, it was a really good stack of books this week, to be honest. If I had a pick of the week, it would have to go to Catwoman from last week. So technically can't pick this one, but it was just such a good read, I want to call it out again. Taking Catwoman out of the running, pick of the week would have to go to Robin #7. A lot of great developments in this book. Really excited for issue #8 and where this story is headed. Although again, really enjoyed Task Force Z as well. Definitely didn't beat out Robin, but a really strong first outing, and excited to find out where this book goes as it continues forward. Now, when it comes to the Fear State tie-ins, if you're picking between Detective Comics and Harley Quinn, I don't think it's going to be a surprise to anyone. Detective Comics is the one you really want to pick up. Harley Quinn, honestly, you can probably leave it. But if you're a completionist like me, you're probably going to read it anyway. So, again, great books. Go check out Task Force Z. Go check out Robin. If you didn't get Catwoman last week, definitely go check it out. And I hope you guys have a great week in comics.